because at the moment it just feels like death out there. I don't know if you guys feel that. It feels like that, hopelessness and death. But we have the hope and the joy of the gospel. If we could show that to people, and don't be afraid to show that, if we had the courage to do that, then we would, I think, change the church in New Zealand.
Thanks for joining us for lunch on the way, everyone. Kia ora koutou, welcome to Lunch on the Way. We are three guys doing more than just theology over lunch, and sometimes we do that with others. But I'll have to warn you, though, what's said here is not yet complete, because like any good conversation, you never want it to end. So please join us for Lunch on the Way. I'm Joey Millington, joined by one of our hosts, Jonathan Hoskin and Graham Flett.
Told Joey this is going to be super awkward, and it was. So thanks, bro.
No, it's
awesome.
all good. It's all good.
It almost feels North American, this, the Yahoo part.
What, the Yahoo?
Yeah, because the Kiwis are a little low key, it's not a big deal.
Bit more tame.
Yeah. Although Jonathan's wearing his white shoes today. Notice that again, Jonathan.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
there's an altar call at the end of this.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Not the white jacket, though.
Yeah, not the white jacket.
Not the white jacket. So, how you doing, Jonathan?
I'm good.
Yeah.
I think this is. I've been in this building a few times. It's so nice, and it's so nice to see students here, and so yeah, it's exciting. Nice to see you all. Although I can't see you, I don't have my glasses on. But your forms look great. Yeah.
Actually, you can't see.
No, I can't see.
I didn't. I've known Jonathan for a few years now, and I didn't know you couldn't see without your glasses.
Yeah. It's not.
Do you drive with your glasses?
No.
That explains Auckland traffic a whole lot,
I'm an Aucklander. No, I just yell at people.
Fair enough.
Anyway.
All right, Graham, what's up?
Oh, I'm good.
That's all?
Well, yeah. I mean, I have a few health issues, but I'm working through that. So.
Oh yeah.
We'll
Okay.
walk through those today.
Yeah, we won't.
I did this thing. I tell you, I did this thing on Saturday. Because I do a lot of coaching, and I was asked about. So I was the model sort of coachee, and so I had to pick on something, but it was all about my health and physical fitness, and it got onto the bike thing. 3 times I did this thing. I've been coached 3 times, and all about the bike. So every time I look at the bike, I go about biking to work. I go, I don't know, but it haunts me now. So yeah,
Got to do it now.
got to do it.
And I'm doing well.
That's a question.
Oh, what? What? Already?
Yeah.
Here, I'm going to ask someone to do this just to make sure we're good to go. Can someone go to that microphone and just go, hello?
Hello.
It works. Excellent. Amazing. Because, yes, there's 3 of us. And how this conversation kind of started was Jonathan and Graham had a long-standing friendship, and I just wanted to be a part of it. And they would talk over lunch about random theological things. Jonathan was doing his PhD, and Graham was as well, and they would just kind of talk together, and I would just look at them from a distance and be like, I want to talk too. And I did. And we had some good conversations, and I said to both of them, I said, we should record this because I think my friends would actually love to hear what you both have to say about these things. And that's mostly the motivation for this. And we call it Lunch on the Way because it is about, what's that story in the Gospels around Jesus having lunch or dinner with the disciples?
Oh, was it Road to Emmaus, was it?
Yeah, Road to Emmaus. Yeah. Jonathan came up with it, and he has no clue what's going on. But basically, as they talked on the road to Emmaus, the disciples, this is after the resurrection of Jesus, they got a bit deeper into actually what the heck is going on with Jesus and the gospel and the story, and then they realized who was actually in front of them. And it took a long conversation to get to that big moment, and that's the point of this. A lot of our conversations, they start out quite dull, to be honest, but usually by minute 30 or 40, I'm like, wow, I'm gonna keep that and write that one down and use it in my next sermon. And that's what I do, at least.
You just really sold it.
Well, oh, did I? Sorry, I'm obnoxiously honest sometimes and self-deprecating a little bit.
It's what emerges in the conversation. That's what we found. You start talking. You would find that yourselves. You're in the midst of a conversation, and if you're really listening to each other, something in between begins to happen, and you go, wow. And you start to discover something you hadn't thought about, and it emerges. And that's kind of where we sort of round this is where we went.
That's
gone.
Right.
Yeah.
So, Jonathan,
Yep.
what are we talking about today? And by the way, there's a 4th microphone here on purpose because at a certain point in time, You're all invited to participate. You can ask questions, or you can just say, what you're saying is absolutely ridiculous. Here's my thought. That's what we want you to do. So if you have thoughts, even about what happened at the beginning of the conversation, bring it up at the end.
Yeah.
It's all good. All right?
Yeah, that sounds awesome.
Go for it, Jonathan.
Because, I mean, come up and say anything you want, because we will riff off it. So
Yeah.
one of the rules of Lunch on the Way is that we don't prepare.
No.
So you turn up and you just
cool.
start a conversation most of the time. And sometimes, sometimes it actually works. So
We
we'll see how
prepared.
we go.
We prepared this much for right now.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So what is it, Jonathan?
What are we going to talk about?
Yeah.
Oh, I
you
don't
and
know.
Graham refined it down a little bit on our group chat.
I don't. Oh yeah. Look. Maybe I'll tell you what I've been thinking
Yep.
about.
Yeah, let's hear it.
I'm hoping that the second June movie is going to be as good as the first
Okay.
June
Oh,
movie. So
yeah.
everyone seen the first June
Yeah,
movie?
yeah, cool.
Oh yeah, it was good, right? Did you
Yeah.
guys like it?
It was
Okay.
really
That
boring.
was awesome.
Did you? I liked it.
Dude, it was
Oh, I
awesome.
loved it.
Yeah, it was awesome. It was awesome. So the second June, you haven't watched it? You should go and watch it. It's really good. It's 3 hours or something though.
No,
it's very
it's-
long. Okay, so that's one thing. The second thing on my mind, I don't know if you guys have heard. There's like a bit of a groundswell coming, and I think it's even here. There's some people, some well-known people out there talking about. I'm just going to go for this.
Go for it. Yeah.
Talking about like.
Is this not what we talked about?
No, this is not what we.
All right.
Yeah. So you throw me in the deep end, I'm going to throw you in the deep
Fair
end.
enough.
There's like a bit of a groundswell coming that could be cool to talk about of like kind of reforming the way that church is done. So there's a whole lot of kind of well-known celebrity kind of theologians at the moment that
So
are
who's
thinking.
that?
Yeah, list some
Oh,
people.
should we list them?
Yeah, list them.
Yeah.
Well, the biggest one is John Mark Comer.
Yeah.
Oh,
Have you heard
okay.
of him? Yeah. Okay.
So,
Yeah.
Okay, so John Mark Comer, and I think he's just about to launch what I don't know what he kind of sees as a new way of doing church. So he's kind of. I think he's done with the model of Sunday mornings where we kind of turn up and have a congregation and have the preacher at the front and have worship. So I think he's kind of in his mind. I hope I'm not misquoting him. He's kind of seeing that we're coming to the end of that model.
I heard
Or
he
that there's
listens, so he's gonna know if
he
you misquote.
listens.
He
Yeah.
listens.
So if you're listening, John,
No,
John
he
Mark,
doesn't.
come back and you can refute this. But he's thinking that kind of model is broken. So there's it seems to me, and there's a few other, Strawn Coleman, I think he's also in this kind of boat.
Mhm.
I think they're friends, and that they're thinking that kind of model needs to move
Okay.
on. So it's interesting to me. But my question would be then, what's good reform? What's a true reform, reformation of that model, and what's a false one? Because I think it's always tied up with our own kind of baggage when we move, when we critique things that the church is doing, and we need to discern. And how do we discern what God is calling us to reform and what we simply want to reform?
Good question.
So
Yeah,
there's one
yeah,
question.
yeah.
And my second question
Uh-oh.
would be what are the challenges of theology for in the next 10 years? What's a central challenge for theology in the next 10 years?
These are big questions,
Jonathan, I'm not ready for this conversation.
Good. Yeah, so those are mine.
The trouble is you get this really unscripted sort of stuff that can't. We have the advantage when we do this is that we can think, oh no, we're not going to put that up. That's really bad.
We're just
Yeah.
like, no, dude,
So
we're not
it's
doing that
it's
one.
kinda like, so we're going, saying things
Well-
that maybe and it's a little bit thinking out loud, you see, because it's like it's a conversation. It's like we're not saying this is so, and like any conversation, as you said, there isn't exactly a full stop.
Yeah, we'll
Continues
keep
on.
having a conversation literally once
Yeah.
we hit stop. But
Yeah.
here's
Yeah.
my initial thoughts, Jonathan, to what you said about the reform bit.
Cool.
What I hear is what I felt, at least coming out of Bible college. I went to uni in Canada, where I was a student for a Bachelor of Ministry, and around that pressure cooker kind of environment. I'm in chapel services twice a week. I'm living on campus with other students who are also going through the same experience. And the thing that's always in the back of our mind is, how can we make or form the expression of church in a way that is not only authentic but more true, but also reaches people and is theologically sensitive. And honestly, a lot of the times it turns into just what I want to see, and not as much practically theologically oriented. Where it's just like, well, man, back in 2011 to 15, Hillsong and this thing, Bethel became really big, at least with my my colleagues in my peers, and we were all like, man, you know what? Any church, you're not doing church right unless it has like some type of like passionate worship band. And I'm like, at the very least, it needs to reform to that, because a lot of us came from a tradition that may not have been like that. And looking back now, I'm like, that was so short-sighted. Not to say that that stuff isn't good or is bad, not saying that at all. But what I'm saying is I wasn't considering the whole scope, if you will, in that conversation. And actually now when I hear somebody like John Mark Comer say, I'm going to do, in air quotes, do church differently or gather differently or emphasize things differently, I want to put on the brakes a little bit. And not because it's not a good thing to think critically about what you do, but what have we done and why are we changing things? Is it just a generational preference? Are you a Gen X person, John Mark Comer, and Jonathan, you're in that generation, and you have things stylistically differently, where I'm a younger millennial, and I actually find I'm drawn a lot more to more liturgical and traditional forms of worship, with still some charismatic elements in there, but I find that I'm drawn to really thoughtful, not that some things aren't thoughtful.
Because you're a dad now.
It's because I'm a dad now, yeah. Maybe. Yeah, I'm just getting older, right? Yeah. Check, boring.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. But those are my initial thoughts, at least, where I'm like, wait, hold up. What? Just put the brakes on.
Yeah.
What is actually needs to change, and what actually has a place and a purpose and some meaning in it. But those are my initial thoughts.
That's good. That's good.
Well, I mean,
you've been around for a while.
Yeah. Well, once they reform, I go,
yeah.
oh, because in my mind,
yeah,
I respect reform theology, but I just get a bit nervous when we go use the word reform, because they're going,
right,
whose agenda?
Yeah.
And so I'll give my age. I'm 63, so I've seen charismatic renewal. I've seen a whole lot, and so part of me goes, something new. I go, what's a bit like you, Jonathan, Joey. What is this, another package?
Yep.
So I'm kind of interested in, and partly I'm invested here too, because it just goes public. But I have 3 daughters, married daughters, lovely husbands, great son-in-laws, but actually, all 3 are not church-goers, regular church-goers. So, and yet they have faith. And that question bugs me, because I'm going, there are a lot that don't go to church, millennials that don't go to church now. And I put myself on the line. Sometimes I think, I can understand why. That's a admission. I think going to church regularly is a really important thing, but I do get, one of my daughters said to me, Dad, one day, a number of years ago, she said, Dad, why would I go to church? And I sort of waited, and she said, because I can get everything I want online. But she said, I'd be there tomorrow if I could find connection. I think that's deeply profound. You have to explore what she means by connection, but I think it has something to do with deep relationship, a gritty, wrestling kind of faith. That's what she's looking for. And they'd be there tomorrow.
Yeah.
Where are you at?
Well, man, I don't know about you guys, but church can be super boring, and it can be super monotonous, right? Am I the only one here? And I'll take that awkward laugh as a yes. Yeah, I mean, it is. So I totally get that. That's where I'm at. You turn up each morning, and especially if you're involved in your church and you're a pastor or something, it can be really tiresome to do the same thing. Set the chairs up, set up the PA system, give another sermon, get the band going, and you know that it's good to be doing it, but it does get monotonous after a while, right? Mm-hmm. But in saying that, that's not a reason sometimes just to want a new novelty. So and it's really hard to, as I was trying to say, it's hard to discern when it's time to move or when it's trying to try to hear the call of why those church models came into being in the first place. Mm-hmm. So that's what I would say would be the first kind of thinking about what is true and false reform. Is it being more authentic to the first calling?
What's the first calling?
Well, exactly, and I think everyone has to answer that for themselves. I don't know. Mm-hmm. Is it the first church calling of the Protestant movement? I don't know if we're Protestants. Should we be going back and hearing that again? Why did they reform? Why did they set up like worship and kind of their spiritual formation in that kind of way? Should we be going back to it and being more true to it, where have we drifted away from it?
Mm-hmm.
So that would be one thing. Maybe that's a way of reviving the Sunday morning service without having to change the outward look of it. I don't know. Or maybe the outward look needs to change for you to get back to the core of that first call. So that'd be one thing. But also, I wouldn't want to discount that I think there is a real movement of the Spirit happening at the moment. And you see it on YouTube all the time. Because we have so much more, we can listen to Orthodox theologians, we can listen to Catholic theologians, we can listen to Protestant theologians. People are saying, maybe there's a different way to do church. That isn't being unauthentic to the tradition that I've been brought up in, but it's in many kind of ways been more authentic to the tradition, the very core of that tradition that I was brought up in.
Yeah.
I don't know.
What I hear...
That's what I was
No, those are good thoughts. What I hear is it okay? I think it's okay that church is boring sometimes.
Yeah, I think that's true.
You know
Yeah,
what?
I do too.
I think because I'm like, when I go to church, I'm going to define, when I go to the gathered body of Christ on a Sunday morning, if we want to be more specific, what I see that as is a rhythm of life. What I see that as is what's a priority? Well, it's gathering together with people who also have Jesus as Lord and are filled with the Spirit. And whether you're a liturgical church, high church or low church, or Pentecostal or Wesleyan Methodist like myself, everybody has a liturgy. It doesn't matter whether it's thoughtful or not, or spontaneous or not. Everyone has a liturgy. So the liturgy is actually the thing that's forming over time, where instead of being on Monday to Friday in the marketplace, at work, seeing 100+ advertisements as I drive home from work on billboards, or whether on the radio or on the podcast I'm listening to, I show up on a Sunday morning to the gathered people of God, with the gathered people of God, and I'm letting that be the thing that actually informs who I am, why I'm here and stuff. And the fact that it's boring might not, maybe that's where I'm at in my life right now, but I'm okay with that. I went to a church, I told Graham this morning, I went to the Matakana Anglican Church, because my uncle-in-law has a place around there for the family during holidays, and he brings the extended family in. And I don't normally go to church on Sundays when I'm on holiday, but I felt like going that Sunday. And the service was high Anglican. It was, call and response, recite this, songs off an organ, and it was like, by all intents and purposes, boring. Right. But for me, it made so much sense, because it was bringing me on a journey of, this is actually how you should view yourself in the world, where God is the beginning of the story, is the story, and is the end of the story, and he's inviting you into that. Right. And the service was actually articulating that. And then I was surprised when the priest or the vicar got up, he had a really engaging 10-minute homily. Like, it was probably one of the best sermonettes I've listened to in a long time. Yeah. And it was really thoughtful, evangelical in the sense that it was calling people to action. Yeah. And it wasn't just like a thought exercise. So I actually left that boring service. It was not child friendly. Yeah. Quite, I was like, oh, this actually helped me along the way. Yeah. But that's not to say what you're saying isn't true and isn't important to consider as well.
Thanks, man.
You know what? I'm just affirming that in you.
Whew, I was worried there for a minute.
Yeah. But how about, Graham, you say something, and then we open up the mic to see if anyone else has thoughts.
I mean, I just, on the back of what you're saying, I have a good friend who's, she's at Massey University, he's in communications senior lecturer there, and he's a Catholic. And so, we were conversation partners. I was doing my PhD, and he goes to it. He said he quite likes going to a mass that's in Latin. Yeah. And I said, what? Why? He said, because he said, I'm sitting there. I said, but I don't understand anything. He said, yeah, it's as boring as heck. But he says, I'm there in my mind as I'm looking around, and I think his point was saying is he's absorbing something. Often we, in our Western way of thinking, we're so linear and so outcome driven. What's the purpose of this? What am I going to get out of this? And I think what's happening there is a making that's happening that's yep. in that space. Yep. Something is going on more than we realise, and I think we want to reduce it all down to, I got this out of this. All right, this is the purpose of this. It doesn't mean to say those aren't good questions, but yeah.
I think that's right, and I mean,
you can walk to the mic if you want
you can
interrupt us.
And I
Seriously.
will. I will say. Just let me say two more things. I think. I mean, we're not knocking John Mark Comer here, because
No.
I think what he is doing and what I can hear here is he's doing two things. One, he's wanting to get a liturgical kind of way of Sunday morning where we are all have skin in the game. So we help disciple each other in a more closer, kind of more intimate way. I think that's what he's after. So often you can turn up to a Sunday and just leave, and you haven't. How are you being formed in that moment?
Mm-hmm.
So he's trying to come back to these deeper rhythms. I think that's epic.
Yeah.
But two things I would say about true and false reform. One, I think it can't become exclusive, where you say this now we've got it. Now this is the only way that we should do church. I think as soon as you narrow down and you say that there's no other forms of expression of worship and Sunday mornings that are legitimate, only our one is legitimate now, you're in trouble. So hopefully that doesn't happen. That would be one thing. And the other thing I would say is that I think true and false reform, good reform, stays connected to the larger body of the church.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as you remove yourself and you say, we don't need the church anymore, then I think it's a false reform.
Yeah.
So those are the two other things I would say to that. Yeah. We got a question. We got a question. Go, man. Yeah.
I'm not sure if it's a question, more just adding to the conversation.
Yeah.
I'll keep it brief. Got involved in church leadership, worship bands, all that kind of thing 20 years ago. Gone through that. Know when the smoke machine needs to be turned on. Know exactly the timing when people should leave. And there's a 30-minute 3-point sermon. Very and that does get old. 20 plus years later, I'm kind of connected with a lot of very passionate Christians who don't want to go there. Similar to what I just heard about, hey, we're just going to stay at home. Yeah. Some may suggest that piece of our church is bigger almost than all the nuclear Sunday morning piece. I have personally found that I've never been bored going into these home churches, this collective of growing, it would seem, 20 adults, 10 kids and 2 dogs hanging out praying for each other. That's not boring and never has been for me. And I do wonder, with our kind of egos and how we want to create connections with God, how that translates to, how we choose to carry out our versions of religion, even down to denominations. Don't know. I'm just glad to be kind of connected.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Thanks, Greg.
Man, that was a rich. That was awesome.
Greg, congratulations! You're the first person to contribute to the podcast other than the three of us.
So good.
Thank you.
Thanks,
those
man.
are good thoughts.
Yeah, really good thoughts.
I know what you mean. It gets old a little bit, and you know what? I don't think it's a bad thing. I remember I had someone when I was doing my master's back in Canada. He went to a church that was incredibly seeker sensitive, but wasn't superficial, but was really explicit about evangelism, right? And bringing people who are de-churched or people who are about my age or around my age in. And he made the comment. He said, "You know what? I feel like I'm aging out of this church a little bit with my Christian maturity." And I remember thinking, I didn't say this to him, but I remember thinking, you're right and you're wrong. Where I'm like, you're right in the sense that you are maturing as a Christian, you are maturing as a follower of Jesus, you're looking for deeper things. You're obviously not receiving that in some level on a Sunday morning because it's catering to a particular group of people who are really just just getting started on their Christian journey. I get that. But at another level, I'm like, you're not beyond this because this is your community. This is your church. If anything, that's an initiative and a moment for you to step up and for you to start serving in a particular way that actually not only pushes you beyond what you're comfortable doing potentially, but also pushes you into your giftings. He was an incredibly bright person. He could lecture, deeply philosophically minded, and he did do that, which I was really encouraged by. He hosted once a week deeper theology classes, and then he had it wasn't a podcast, but it was like a video thing where he would just continue on that conversation with another guy and publish it online. And I guess it was a podcast, but it wasn't at the time. Anyway, so it would engage other people specifically for that church into that conversation who also wanted to go deeper but didn't want to lose that evangelistic, outward-looking kind of posture that the church clearly had. And it was a church of 600 people by the time I left Canada, and because they were so effective at drawing people in. Anyway, that was great, Greg, and that's what I thought of when you said that. Yeah. Anyone else? Yeah, go for it. Yeah, feel free to bend it, the bend mic down.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm not gifted with height in that way. So, but I just thought quite similar to your story, actually. But my church in Nelson went through a bit of a change just before COVID, actually. It was quite funny, but my pastor down there read Francis Chan's Letters to the Church. I'm not sure if any of you have read that.
I've heard of it. I haven't read it, though.
Yeah, basically talking about that part in Acts 2, verses 42 to 47, where, you know, the church gathered together, they prayed together, they, you know, read the word together, talked about it. And in that, Francis Chan kind of started a movement of like micro home churches kind of thing. So it's quite interesting. So my church in Nelson actually began that journey noticing that in like normal church kind of thing, the stereotypical church, things like discipleship was kind of lacking. People's commitment to church was kind of lacking. You know, it's very easy to turn up into a very stereotypical church session and not participate in one way or another. So we, while still remaining one church, we kind of broke up into these what we called neighborhood churches, ran by what we called neighborhood shepherds, that were supervised by like the leadership team. So we were still very interconnected and connected with the wider church as well, like you were saying, made sure about that. But something I did find from that is that you couldn't not turn up and not you couldn't not turn up because kind of thing, it was like you couldn't be missed at all. And also you couldn't turn up and not participate. Yeah. And the discipleship, the level of discipleship was to a level that I've never seen before, because it was just so strong in that smaller group where you can't be missed. Now that did replace our Sunday services. We did have like all-ins kind of thing. But yeah, basically it was very much a move of the kind of spirit. My pastor's kind of feeling called to change this. They're still doing this down there. And like regularly, changing the neighborhood shepherds like every few years to making sure that they're being kept healthy as well. But what I will say about that is, the level of discipleship in those kind of places, I think there's something that we in the wider church need to look at and go, okay, maybe we don't change that drastically, but maybe what can we bring from that into our kind of model of church? Yeah.
That's great.
Thanks,
yeah,
Susie.
Thank you.
Yeah.
There's two things. One thing I hear from there is the need for connection. So connection in some kind of way. And I think your church model gets connection through relationships. So it's connecting the people. But I think there's more connections that need to happen in any kind of church model. One is relationships. So discipling each other, hearing from each other's lives. Where's God working in your life? How does it speak back into my life? And you can't, in many kind of ways, you can't do that work if you're not close to people. You're not kind of rubbing up against their lives. You're not getting the smell of their life. You know what I mean? Like Pope Francis would say, the pastor needs to smell like the sheep. That, you know what I mean? And you only get that if you're in the pen.
What
with
a quote!
The sheep. Yeah,
Man,
it's an epic.
I'm Catholic now.
Yeah, it's an epic quote, and it's one of those ones that quote that always comes back to me. So that's one connection. But I think because I went to a few different churches over the break. I went to a home church, and man, the connection that you get with people. But then I went to an Eastern Orthodox church too, and the connection you get with tradition, I think, is something that is missing from our churches. And man, I would love whatever reformation happens amongst our churches, or whatever comes out of this moment that we're having, I hope that we connect back to the tradition of the church. That would be epic. So that's a connection. The other connection that I found, now I found this in both churches, the home church and the Eastern Orthodox Church, was this connection with something beyond us. That life just isn't material. That it is both a mixture of the material world and it's a mixture of the spiritual world. And together, that's where we come alive. So that's what I'd say. 3 connections. Yeah.
In response to that, I think there is a sense of, just changing the language slightly, that connection of the relationship is a sense of the immanence of God.
Yeah.
But I think what you're talking about when you went to the Orthodox Church, there is something of the transcendence of God that we're missing, which then speaks to the sense that the mystery of God. There's something other, there's something that beyond us that's drawing us in. I think that's a little bit where you're going.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, and I think that often the sort of kind of so contemporary sort of messaging that we do, and I just think of Greg, the planned service, it's so edited. Actually, we've edited God out of it because there's no white space.
Yeah, that's right.
And that analogy that I think you did use as a title for your masters.
That's right.
When you read a book, how do you read the letters? You only know the letters and the words by the degree of the white space between them, on black on white. Yeah. And where is it where's the meaning? It's in the white spaces. Using that analogy and thinking we need white space within our church experience.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's a great.
I feel like you two just had a moment there.
Oh man, we have moments all the time. Yeah, that's right.
Go for it.
So my church is quite traditional, and pulpit preacher to the congregation. And we a couple of years ago kind of changed our evening meetings to go into our smaller prayer hall and have a small dinner after, and it was a much more communal space. Yeah. So we've kind of got that mixture of traditional and more contemporary, what would be, outreach. But it's got me thinking, because I also am interested in apologetics, and I've looked on videos of that. What does the social medialization, for lack of a better term, of church? How does that affect this topic, in the sense that you can go get almost any preacher, any denomination at any time? How does that affect this?
I got to warn you, you just hit on Graham's PhD topic. So we could be here for another hour.
Yeah, you could be.
Excellent question.
Look, that's the digital space changes everything, because space changes. And I mean, I think there's questions about what is it to be human that we need to be asking. What does it mean to be human in terms of the Christian understanding of what it means to be human? I think embodiment is really important. So actually being in the space physically, so that becomes to the material world that we're part of. And I would draw sort of, I know there's other opinions about what it means to be human, but I kind of want to push that way a little bit. So actually being in the space together is really, really important, physically in the space.
Yeah,
I would. Oh yeah, do you want to go
just
first?
real quick? Thanks for the question. Basically, what I see. There's this guy who just came to New Zealand. He's still here in the country, Kerry Newhoff, Canadian church leader and leadership guy. But throughout COVID, he basically said he was so into online church, I was kind of put off by it a little bit, to be completely honest, by the podcast. But then I got a more nuanced understanding of what he actually was talking about. He was saying that online church is unavoidable. It's going to happen. It's a thing. It's like you no longer watch television on your screen. Or you no longer go just to the movies. You watch television on demand at home, or you watch the movie at home. It's like that kind of shift, where it was a communal thing first, now it's very much an individual thing. And he actually kind of laments that a little bit, where sometimes there's some technological innovations that happen that have a positive outcome, but also a consequence as well. And I think for church, for gathering rather, people together, this is one of those things. But with that being said, I know that during COVID, Alpha, this outreach, seeker-sensitive kind of program that is in the UK at Holy Trinity Brompton, that's now everywhere, they did Alpha online, and it was incredibly impactful and successful. Where Nicky Gumbel, the guy who created Alpha, was incredibly skeptical at first. He almost refused to do it out of principle because he was so committed to the in-personness of that program for people exploring what Christianity is about. But then people just showed up on Zoom, and they started following Jesus. And you're just like, all right, this is not what I would prefer, but something is still happening. Even though we are losing something, some good things are happening as a result as well. It's just... I tell people at my church, because I'm in charge of some of the online stuff, I say the website and the live stream and the podcast that has the sermons, I consider those the front door to the front door of the church. Where I'm like, now in the 21st century, nobody is going to just walk into your church. One, I don't think non-Christians are going to walk into your church anymore. But if you are a Christian, nobody who's a Christian is going to walk into your church unless they look at something online and view your service online. So I see it, but I would always encourage somebody who's online to walk through the front door. You know, that's always the step you want to make people move towards. But it's not to say that online isn't good too. Sorry, that was a bit of a...
Well, I mean, I think that, and my thing is not digital is bad. Or
No,
anything.
no.
It's just, it's here to stay.
Yeah, exactly.
But we have to think about it. We do have to think about it, and I think that's my point. We have to think about the way in which it's reshaping the world in which we're in. And one of the things about the digital thing, just to go off on a bit of a tangent, is that actually the digital space is a participative space. I think the space that we've predominantly been in, that's why I think we're in this flux at the moment, has been a very much a print world. And the print world is you know, you're passive in one sense. Somebody's speaking to you, you read a book, you're passive. In the digital world, it's much more interactive. So what does that mean for church? What would that look like if we start to think in a much more participative way? That raises all sorts of questions about preaching, about the way in which we're doing church that's meaningful. I haven't got the answers to that. I'm just throwing that in the air. I wonder about that.
Yeah, and before you get up, we want your question. I would just say, I don't know if anyone's here has read, and I do recommend it, a book called The Body Keeps the Score. Yeah, it's an epic book. Look, when we bring the gospel out into the world, it touches broken people. And there's something about the body that holds our trauma. And it's about teaching people to come back into spaces where they feel that they can be whole and healthy. And my biggest worry with technology is that people remain in broken spaces. And the church, there's something about meeting together that is both, it's healing spiritually but also physically. If we could pivot the church into that kind of thinking, what kind of spaces would we create? That's one thing. Yeah.
Hey guys. So I was really intrigued to ask you guys, because you guys come from quite different backgrounds and things. What do you think is the biggest challenge to the general church of New Zealand? Because I don't know if it's just a personal revelation for me or kind of looking at my friends and seeing some similar sort of trends. I think recently I've noticed being comfortable is being quite a big, way that the enemy can attack us, making us comfortable. We don't want to go talk to others about God and things. Yeah, so, and talking to other friends about churches from around the world. So I talked to a South Korean friend and he said that he found that materialism is a really big issue in South Korea at the moment because it's all about getting the next thing, the next coolest thing. So yeah, I was just really interested to hear, what do you guys think from your different perspectives? What's the biggest challenge on the church in New Zealand in general at the moment?
That's a great question for Joey. Yeah.
I'll tell you what, the Canadian. Sure, you can bring it to me. I've been here 5 years.
That's a great question, man. Thank you.
I know what all your problems are. What I would say is, whenever we talk about those types of things together, I always want to get very specific, because I live in East Tamaki, that is 50% Southeast Asian immigrant population. I am one of those immigrants, not from Southeast Asia, but I'm one of those immigrants in that community. So that community is so different, and also it has a high Pakeha retirement group as well. I think the highest age bracket in East Auckland is 65 or 70 plus, because there's a lot of generational wealth in that area. So with that being said, for that question, all I can do is think about my context, really. I think what you touched on is what I would also say as well, where it's moving people from passivity a little bit into seeing their discipleship as actually a doing and a going out. Sometimes I think the problem with being middle class or upper middle class, which that area certainly is you like living comfortably and you live comfortably within your bubbles. And so if I could preach to that area of Auckland, I would say you need to get shaken up a little bit. And I think the call to action for churches in that area would be getting people outside of their comfort zone, because I think being comfortable is antithetical to discipleship. Yeah.
There's so many layers to this, I'm not quite sure. I mean, we talk about a growing level of biblical literacy that's through the church, which to some degree probably is reflected in our pulpits. Probably for me is, and we've talked a bit about this here at college as well in theology, is that we actually need imagination, theological imagination, in terms of our communities, in terms of our churches. I don't mean just imagining for the sake of imagining, but again drawing a little bit what you have said, Jonathan, into the text again, knowing our deep Christian story, our 2,000 years of Christianity, and thinking about our culture, and then reimagining what does this look like? How's God speaking to us in living out our faith in this context? Which comes back to you. What does that look like? Yeah. And I think that sort of questioning then with the text then begins to get us excited about again wanting to read the text, because we're freshly imagining we're in this particular place at this particular time. So what is this context? And what's God doing amongst us? What's he calling us to? Which I think starts to resonate with both what you're saying.
You got the final word, Jonathan, because we've got to end in a minute.
Yeah, cool. I would say people are scared and hopeless. Yeah. I think most people have no vision for the future. And if it is a vision, it's a dark one, and it's an apocalyptic one. And I think, what we have, and I think we need to turn that question back on ourselves and ask ourselves, do we have joy in the gospel message? And that's where it starts. Do we have hope? Because it's on the sidelines of the soccer games with our kids, and it's in the supermarket, and it's in the church pews where we have this hope that comes out of us. That is the passing on of the gospel. You know what I mean? Yes, give people the Bible, but you are the gospel message. It's the gospel message in your life that will change the people around you, and they will see hope. And they will see, because at the moment, it just feels like death out there. I don't know if you guys feel that. It feels like that, hopelessness and death. But we have the hope and the joy of the gospel. If we could show that to people, and don't be afraid to show that, if we had the courage to do that, then we would, I think, change the church in New Zealand.
Thanks for joining us for lunch on the way, everyone.